Hello everyone, Marcy here. Sorry for the huge delay on the video. Life stuff got in the way. The general state of the game was pretty demotivating, admittedly, but alas, we are here. With the release of the Heliostat update, Warlocks got some pretty huge buffs in regards to our buddies we summon. Unfortunately, this doesn't include threadlings, but we will still benefit from the changes as you will see. Getting right into the build, starting off with our super, we will be using Noodle Storm as that will launch 9 tracking projectiles that will then explode into threadlings after a brief period after impact. The class ability we will be using is going to be Phoenix Dive, as that has the shortest cooldown and granting 2 stacks of cure to us as well as nearby allies. Our melee will be Arcane Needle, as that has 3 charges as well as having easy access to Unravel. Our grenade will be Threadling Grenade, as that will spawn 3 threadlings, and as you will come to see, will be a huge part of the build overall. For our first aspect, we will be using Weaver's Call, as that will allow us to periodically generate perched threadlings by simply doing damage. Upon using our class ability, we'll generate 3 additional threadlings as well as deploy any perched threadlings, and allows us to get 10% class ability energy whenever we deal damage with our threadlings, which does include the threadling spawn from our super, so you can essentially get a full refund on your class ability whenever you use your super. Our second aspect will be Hellion, to spawn in a Solar Soul whenever we use our class ability. It will last for 20 seconds, and it will shoot at enemies with a magma blob that applies 30 Scorch, which can eventually lead to an ignition, and is also just nice for both passive damage and generating light transcendence energy. Our first fragment we will be using is Facet of Justice, as that will allow our transcendent ability kills to cause an explosion, which deals up to 130 damage and can also cause a chain of explosions. It also grants plus 10 to the super stat, which is just going to be nice considering the kind of build this is.
Editor's note that I forgot to add in this section, but Hellion does count for this, so does Unravel projectiles, so long as those 2 are the source of the kill. So Hellion can start a chain reaction of explosion kills.
Our second fragment will be Facet of Dawn, to grant us Radiant on powered melee attacks, granting us a 20% increase in weapon damage as well as granting us anti-barrier rounds. Our third fragment will be Facet of Mending, as that will allow us to get Cure on grenade kills, which can also be activated through Hellion. Our fourth fragment will be Facet of Courage, as that will buff Hellion by an extra 10% as well as granting plus 10 to the grenade stack. Our final fragment will be Facet of Devotion, as that will help get us light transcendence energy, granting a minimum of 1% light energy to a maximum of 5% whenever we kill a darkness debuff enemy, as well as giving us plus 10 to the melee stat to negate the stat penalty from Facet of Dawn. Going over our weapons, the first one is obviously going to be Mint Retrograde. Long story short, it is just very, very good and does practically everything you want in a gun. It's good for ad clear, it's good for mini boss or champ killing, and good for boss damage as well. I will say, as an added little bonus, I would recommend using Vanguard's Determination for the origin trait, as whenever we use our class ability, we will be getting 2% damage resist for 10 seconds, which is refreshable, and it stacks up to 3 times for an overall 6% damage resist, which just generally speaking helps with survivability. For the energy weapon, I highly recommend using Tide Apex with Attrition Orbs and Chaos Reshape, as Attrition Orbs will allow us to generate orbs very easily and grants up to 35% bonus damage while in combat through Chaos Reshape. However, Mida Mini Tool is going to be a decent alternative if you are not able to get a Attrition Orbs Chaos Reshape to your Tide Apex, as Mida Mini Tool can roll with the perk combo Attrition Orbs and Aggregate Charge, and Aggregate Charge states that this weapon deals more damage for each elemental debuff applied to the target. The values on this are going to be 11%, 22%, and 33%, as it caps out at 3 debuffs. So damage-wise, it is comparable to Yeartide with Chaos Reshape, but you do lose out on the passive healing benefit that Chaos brings. The exotic weapon of the build is going to be Finality's Augur. To quickly explain the function of the exotic to those that don't know, this is a linear fusion with the unique ability to hold your reload button to spawn in a rune-inscribed turret for the cost of 3 ammo. And this turret will automatically target enemies once deployed. However, you have the ability to paint a specific enemy or group of enemies, making the turret fire a volley of missiles dealing, put it bluntly, a lot of damage. The catalyst will further bolster the damage of the turret as it grants the perk Bait and Switch, which is a 30% damage buff that lasts for 10 seconds whenever you deal damage with all your weapons. Finality's turret can be be used for both boss damage and add clear or roam, as it is very ammo efficient as you gain 3 shots per heavy ammo brick with no scavenger mods, allowing you to freely use it whenever you want. Going over armor, for stats, we primarily want to focus on getting a minimum of 160 grenade, as this will allow us to get to 200 with 2 grenade font mods, granting 65% more damage to not only our threadling grenade, but Hellion as well. The secondary stat is going to be a minimum of 100 super to grant us the most energy gains, but I would highly recommend putting in as much as you can without sacrificing grenade. The more super stat you have, the better, as it will grant Needlestorm extra damage, but only on the initial cast, as the threadlings don't inherit the damage buff, unfortunately. The final stat you want to focus on is going to be class. Ideally, you have a minimum of 60 to 70 as a nice middle ground. However, if you have to sacrifice super stat for it, I would recommend as having more class stat, the better. Just as an extra little note, if you have someone on your team with the Boots of the Assembler Warlock exotic, whenever you are granted the buff Blessing of the Sky, your class stat gets an extra 100 stat points added to it. So in damage phases where you do have a Boots of the Assembler, which is going to be pretty much always, you don't actually have to spec into the class stat. Quickly going over the mods for the helmet, I run 2 copies of Dynamo to grant us 8% super energy whenever we use our class ability, with 1 copy of Super Font to grant plus 20 to the super stat. Going over gauntlets, I would recommend running 2 copies of Grenade Font, as this will allow us to get to 200 grenade stat, assuming you have 160 grenade. For the chest piece, it is going to be general resist mods, appropriate for the activity. On the boots, I use 2 Solar Surge and 1 Strand Surge to buff the damage of Finality's Augur and Yeartide Apex by an extra 17% and Mint by 10%. Just as a quick reminder, surges do stack with Radiant. For class item, I use 1 copy of Bomber, Time Dilation, and Distribution. For the exotic armor piece, it's going to be an exotic class item with Spirit of Apotheosis and Spirit of Starfire. Spirit of Apotheosis will grant you a full refund on your grenade, melee, and class ability, as well as grant you and nearby allies 3 stacks of cure. It also fully refunds your allies' class ability energy on supercast. After the initial casting animation, you are granted the buff Insatiable, which grants 66% increased grenade and melee regen per second for 8 seconds, effectively allowing you to spam both abilities pretty freely. Spirit of Starfire will allow us to get 5% grenade energy for dealing empowered weapon damage, as well as get 15% grenade energy for getting empowered weapon kills, which, if you're unaware, Radiant does meet this criteria, as well as Well of Radiance and Empowering Rift. Quickly going over the artifact mods, there's going to be 2 main ones that are, I'd say, necessary for the build to truly shine, with additional mods that are nice to have but not required. The first mod is going to be Pack Tactics, which states dealing damage with threadlings increases threadling damage. At maximum stats, threadlings stun unstoppable champions. Now, to further break down the mod, what this will do for us is every time we deal damage with threadlings, we will gain or refresh a buff called Pack Tactics, which stacks up to 2 times. The first stack will grant us 15% more threadling damage, and the second stack will give us 30% more threadling damage, as well as allow our threadlings to stun unstoppable champions. The unique thing about this mod that isn't stated anywhere is that once you're at the second stack, it will continue to grant threadlings a damage buff. However, it's only in very small increments, usually going up by 2 or 3 damage, but considering how many threadlings were spawning, this can ramp up a lot quicker than you think. The second mod I would say is necessary is Shield Crush, which states while you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or a Void Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. While you are Amplified or Radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. The main part of the mod that I want to focus on is the second part, granting us increased grenade damage while Radiant. The damage buff granted is a 25% multiplicative buff to our grenades as well as Hellion, boosting our overall damage by a significant margin whenever we take into account Spirit of Apotheosis. This will also synergize with Spirit of Starfire, as that gives us grenade energy whenever we deal empowered weapon damage, as stated before. Other artifact mods that are nice to have will be shown on screen now with what they do, with a notable shout out for Fever and Chill, as that will give us yet another avenue for Radiant. The screenshots you're seeing now are from Destiny Data Compendium, otherwise known as DDC. I'd highly recommend using this resource if you're ever curious about anything regarding the game. Just to quickly go over the armor set bonuses, I would would recommend using. Two-piece Bushido is going to be really good, as that is another avenue for healing, as upon getting a kill after reloading or switching weapons, you are granted 35 HP. However, it is on a 3-second cooldown. A side grade for this would be Iron by Chromate, as it's basically the same thing as Bushido. However, it only activates at critical health, so if you were to pick one or the other, I would simply just use Bushido. The third set bonus I'd recommend using is Ion Adapter, as that will grant you a 20% AoE damage resist for 15 seconds upon scoring a kill with Mint Retrograde, which it's Mint, you're going to be using it a lot. This will be up nearly all the time, and considering how much explosive damage there actually is in this game, which does include boss stomps, this is just going to be a very, very nice passive bonus. Arguably, one of the strongest options on this list is going to be the two-piece Smoke Jumper set, as that will grant you damage resist whenever you pick up an orb. It will start out at 45% damage resist and decay to roughly 15% over the course of 3 seconds to grant an overall average damage resist of 30% whenever you pick up an orb. The next set I could recommend using is Twofold Crown, as that is another avenue for a lot of healing depending on the amount of ammo drops there are, as it will grant you 70 HP per ammo brick you pick up. Probably my least recommended armor set bonus, though I just figured I'd throw it in here, is going to be the 4-piece Collective Psyche set, as that will increase the duration of Radiant by 50%, granting us more value to Starfire, though again I don't necessarily recommend it, I just wanted to include it. Before we go into this next section, I would like to kindly ask if you like the video so far to please leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It would help me out a ton. This is a pretty new channel, and I do stream on twitch.tv/Marceletta if you want to come by. I stream whenever my internet decides to allow me to stream. It's very up in the air, unfortunately, but what can you do? Anyways, back to the video. Just to quickly go over some of the biggest issues that you're going to run into. The first one being survivability. Without the proper armor set bonuses like Bushido or even something like Smoke Jumper, survivability for a lot of people can be kind of difficult to manage, as your main source of healing is going to be from Facet Amending, and if you're not getting any kills with your Hellion or Threadling grenade or Transcendent grenade, you're just gonna have a pretty rough time. But if you know how to play the kit, then this issue is basically non-existent, as you'll be able to kill things a lot faster than they can kill you. The second issue is the usability outside of relatively close range. The entire build hinges on Dynamo, and if you are unable to proc Dynamo, the build does kind of fall apart, but then again, so does the Getaway Artist build, which, speaking of Getaway Artist, it is by far and away the easiest to use build currently. You eat one grenade and you can get a Bleak Watcher and an Arc Soul, and you don't even need Devour, so you can run Hellion and just use Facet Amending. You don't lose out on the grenade energy, as Getaway Artist still gives you grenade energy on Arc Soul damage, so in terms of ease of use, that wins like 10 times out of 10. Where this build shines, however, is specifically in boss damage. It, mathematically speaking, is better than Getaway Artist, with the main draw of this build in particular being that the diminishing returns are not as severe as it is with Getaway Artist. Due to the way Shatter and Ignitions work in this game, having more than one person on either Bleak Watcher or Hellion leads to diminishing returns, and Getaway Artist kind of relies on both Bleak Watcher and Hellion in order to reach its full damage. Meanwhile, this build, you can have one person, you can have 6 people on it, and it will still perform relatively the same. Yes, it does use Hellion, but that is not where the bulk of the damage is coming from. That's just an added bonus. The bulk of the damage is going to be coming from your weapons as well as Threadlings, and the longer the damage phase goes on for, like the ones in the normal Desert Perpetual, where the damage phases can last upwards of a minute, this is where the build really truly shines, as it will just start to gain more and more value as the damage phase goes on. And in terms of sheer fun factor, I believe this build is infinitely more fun than the Getaway Artist build. Getaway Artist, you eat one grenade and you can fall asleep at the wheel and win. But that's just my opinion. That's up to you to decide. That'll be pretty much it for the video. If you want to see a more roam focused setup where it's less on boss damage and more on like ad clear and stuff like that, so you can use in more higher end, I guess, strikes or whatever, let me know down in the comments. But if you were here for the build, that'll be pretty much it. This is just going to be a bit of a yap session to give a little bit more context as to why this video took so long to make. As the intro alluded to, the general state of the game and community sentiment has been pretty dire. Admittedly, I had to basically force myself to make this video. especially considering the timing of it all. I was grinding for the epic day 1, didn't get the clear, but it's fine. But leading up to that, I was having to kick my grind into overdrive. I wasn't even 400 power yet, and so I was trying to get as much stuff done as possible. And once the epic day 1 came and went, I had to just take a small breather. Battlefield 6 has also been eating up a lot of my time. I've been enjoying that game. If you want to see some, I guess, silly videos or whatever, let me know. I'm trying to break away from Destiny exclusively. I would like to explore my other options, as being tied to one game sounds miserable, but I'm also the Destiny encyclopedia, so like whatever. What can you do? Aside from that, that'll be pretty much it for the video. If you stuck around this long, leave a burger emoji in the comments. That would be a telltale sign. I'll probably heart it. I love burgers. I am a burger. That's besides the point. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. And if you still haven't, please leave a like or subscribe, either or. If you did like the video, you can also do that, but I will be judging you. That's besides the point. You guys have a good one and take care.